Everything you've stockpiled can be taken, legally, by your own government. And most preppers have no idea the paperwork already exists. This isn't conspiracy, it's statute. Executive Order 14603, the Defense Production Act, state emergency management codes across all 50 states. These aren't dusty relics, they're active legal authority. One item on this list has been seized before. Every single unit surrendered, door to door. And it's not firearms. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which 5 categories carry legal seizure risk, which statutes authorize it, and how enforcement actually targets specific owners. Most people prepare for the disaster. Smart people prepare for what the government does during the disaster. Let's start with the one nobody wants to hear. Prescription medications, specifically controlled substances and bulk medical supplies. You've spent months, maybe years, rotating antibiotics, stockpiling maintenance meds, building a medical cache you believe sits safely under your legal prescription. Here's what you're missing. Executive Order 14603, signed in 2012, explicitly lists health resources under federal requisition authority. That's not a suggestion. That's operational language. It means during a declared national emergency, the federal government holds statutory power to commandeer medical supplies for public redistribution. Your valid prescription doesn't override a presidential declaration. It never has. Now layer state law on top of that. The majority of states grant health authorities independent power to requisition medical supplies during declared emergencies. That includes your personal stockpile. Not just hospital inventory, not just pharmacy shelves. Yours. If you're holding 6 months of blood pressure medication or a rotating supply of antibiotics, you're holding exactly what a crisis makes scarce. And scarcity is what triggers requisition. Military medics learn this on day 1 of field training. Medical supplies get seized first in any crisis environment. Not weapons, not food. Medicine. Because medicine carries immediate life or death value and degrades on a known timeline. A tourniquet works in 10 years. Amoxicillin doesn't. That degradation timeline means authorities prioritize medical requisition early, before stockpiles lose potency and become worthless to redistribute. Here's where it gets worse. Opioids and controlled substances sit at the intersection of 2 separate enforcement authorities. DEA scheduling law and emergency requisition power. Your state prescription monitoring program already tracks what you receive, when you received it, and from which pharmacy. That data doesn't vanish during an emergency. It becomes a targeting list. Bulk antibiotics purchased through veterinary or aquarium supply channels create purchase records too. You thought you found a loophole. You created a paper trail. The civilian mistake is assuming legal ownership equals protection from seizure. It doesn't. Legal ownership means you hold the asset today. Requisition authority means the government can take it tomorrow and settle compensation later. The Fifth Amendment requires just compensation for takings. It does not require advance notice, your consent, or a timeline you find acceptable. Compensation arrives months or years after the crisis, if it arrives at all. Not stockpiling less. Specifically, stockpiling smarter. The difference is traceability. Every prescription filled through insurance generates a record linking drug, quantity, and address. Every online purchase through a tracked payment method does the same. While most preppers build their medical cache through convenience, informed people evaluate every acquisition against one question. Can this be linked back to me and this address? That single filter changes everything about how you source, store, and distribute your medical supplies. I've put together a guide covering everything you need to know about protecting your preparedness investment from legal exposure, and you'll find it linked first line of the description. Stored fuel. Gasoline, diesel, kerosene, propane. If you're storing it, you're storing a seizure target. The Defense Production Act and Executive Order 14603 both list energy resources under explicit federal requisition authority. State emergency statutes mirror this almost universally. Fuel isn't just on the list, fuel is the list. It's the logistics linchpin that makes every other resource functional. Military doctrine treats fuel as the single highest priority seizure target in any operational theater, not because it's the most valuable per unit, because it enables everything else. Vehicle movement stops without fuel. Generators die without fuel. Supply distribution collapses without fuel. When authorities need to control a crisis zone, they control the fuel first. Everything downstream follows. Now think about your setup. Above-ground tanks are visible on aerial imagery. Satellite passes and commercial drone surveys can identify storage infrastructure on your property without ever crossing your fence line. If your bulk fuel storage required a permit, that permit created an address-linked record in county files. You filed paperwork telling the government exactly where your fuel sits. During Hurricane Sandy, government-directed fuel rationing overrode private commercial reserves. Gas stations were commandeered. Distribution was centralized. Individual stockpiles with visible infrastructure became low-hanging fruit for enforcement teams working from county records. The civilian approach is storing fuel in obvious, permitted, visible containers. Large above-ground tanks. Multiple propane cylinders on a concrete pad. Diesel drums next to a generator shed. Everything positioned for convenience. Nothing positioned for concealment. While most preppers optimize for access, informed people optimize for the three-variable test. Traceability. Can they link it to you through permits, purchases, or registrations? Visibility. Can they see it from the road, the air, or the property line? Legal classification. Does a statute explicitly name it as requisition eligible? Fuel fails all three. That means your mitigation strategy needs to address all three. The quantified difference is stark. A permitted 1,000-gallon above-ground diesel tank is a known asset at a known address. It gets requisitioned in the first 72 hours of a declared emergency. Distributed storage across multiple smaller containers, acquired through cash transactions, positioned without aerial visibility, operates in a completely different enforcement category. Same fuel, same volume, radically different seizure probability. The resource isn't the vulnerability, the signature is. Firearms and ammunition. You expected this one. Good, because what you don't expect is how the traceability problem applies even after the Disaster Recovery Personal Protection Act of 2006. That federal law was passed specifically in response to the Katrina confiscations. It prohibits firearm seizure during federally declared emergencies. Sounds like protection. It isn't complete. State-level emergency powers vary dramatically. Some states retained independent authority to restrict weapons possession in designated emergency zones. Federal law limited federal action. It did not preempt every state statute. Your state's emergency management code may contain provisions that the 2006 Act never touched. Most gun owners have never read their state's emergency powers chapter. They assume federal protection covers them. That assumption is the vulnerability. Now consider the paper trail. Every firearm purchased through a licensed dealer generates an ATF Form 4473. That form links weapon type, serial number, and buyer identity. The ATF maintains these records are not a registry. Technically accurate. Practically meaningless. The forms exist. They're retrievable. They connect you to specific weapons at a specific address. Bulk ammunition purchases through credit cards or online retailers generate purchase histories in commercial databases. You bought 2,000 rounds of 5.56 on your Visa card. That transaction exists in a searchable system. Military Stability Operations Doctrine treats small arms tracking as a command priority in any area of operations. Not because every weapon gets seized, because identification enables prioritization. Authorities don't need to confiscate every firearm. They need to know where the concentrations are. Purchase volume data gives them that picture without a single door knock. Katrina proved the operational reality. New Orleans police and National Guard units conducted door-to-door firearm confiscations in 2005. Legal challenges succeeded. Years later, the weapons were returned. Years later, the legal system worked. Eventually. But during the crisis window, the window where your firearms actually matter, they were gone. Seizure happens at the speed of a squad car. Legal remedy happens at the speed of a courtroom. Those two timelines don't protect you simultaneously. While most gun owners focus on the Second Amendment as their shield, informed people focus on reducing the signature that makes them a priority target. Not this. Specifically this. The difference between a firearm owner who gets a knock on day one and one who never gets a knock at all isn't rights, it's visibility. Private sales where legal, cash transactions, and distributed storage change your profile from high priority to invisible. Same rights. Same weapons. Completely different enforcement exposure. Pay attention to this one. This is the item teased at the top. The one that's been seized before. Every single unit. Door to door. And it's not firearms. Communications equipment. Ham radios. Satellite phones. Any transmission-capable device you own. The Communications Act of 1934 grants the FCC authority to seize, shut down, or commandeer private communications equipment during declared war or national emergency. That statute is 92 years old. It has never been repealed. It has never been significantly amended on this point. It is active, enforceable law. During World War II, the federal government ordered all privately held shortwave transmitters surrendered. Not restricted. Not licensed differently. Surrendered. Every unit. Compliance was enforced door to door using federal records of licensed operators. This is the historical precedent most preppers have never heard of. It happened. On American soil. To American citizens, using exactly the legal framework that still exists today. Now here's the part that should make your stomach drop. If you're a licensed ham radio operator, you volunteered for the list. The FCC maintains a public searchable database of every licensed amateur radio operator. Your name, your address, your call sign, your license class. It's not hidden. Anyone can search it right now. You registered yourself in a federal database that functions as a ready-made seizure registry for communications equipment. Military signals doctrine treats electromagnetic spectrum dominance as a prerequisite for operational control. You cannot control a crisis zone if independent communications networks operate outside your monitoring. Private ham operators represent exactly that. Independent, capable, unmonitored communications nodes. During a severe national emergency, those nodes become targets not because operators are threats, but because independent communication capability undermines centralized. Information control. The civilian mistake is treating ham radio licensing as a badge of preparedness credibility. It is. It's also a self-indexed entry and a federal equipment registry. While most preppers proudly display their call signs and invest thousands in base stations, antenna arrays, and repeater access, informed people evaluate that investment against the traceability variable. You spent $4,000 on a base station setup. You registered your name and address with the federal agency that holds statutory seizure authority over that exact equipment. You created the targeting data yourself. The quantified difference matters. A licensed registered operator with a visible antenna installation is a known communications asset at a known location. An unlicensed individual with a receive-only scanner and a stored handheld unit purchased with cash has zero federal registration footprint. Same situational awareness capability. Zero seizure exposure. The operational question isn't whether you can transmit, it's whether transmission capability that's linked to your name and address is worth the risk profile it creates. Not abandoning communications preparedness, specifically restructuring it. Receive capability gives you information dominance without transmission exposure. Monitoring frequencies, weather bands, emergency broadcasts, and local traffic requires no license, no registration, no FCC database entry. You hear everything. Nobody knows you're listening. That's the operator's advantage. Food and water stockpiles. The foundation of prepping, the one thing every single person watching this video considers their safest, most unassailable investment. It's not. Executive Order 13603 explicitly lists food resources and water supplies under federal requisition authority. Not ambiguously, explicitly. The language covers all forms of food resources, food resource facilities, and water resources. Your basement pantry qualifies. Your garage shelving, stacked with freeze-dried buckets, qualifies. Your water storage barrels qualify. The statute doesn't distinguish between commercial inventory and personal stockpiles. It covers the resource category. If you hold it, it's covered. But federal authority is only half the exposure. At least 35 states maintain anti-hoarding statutes that activate during declared emergencies. These aren't theoretical. They're codified law with enforcement provisions and criminal penalties. The legal threshold between personal use and hoarding has no fixed, universal definition. That ambiguity is the weapon. When the threshold is undefined, the authority defining it during a crisis holds all the power. Your 12-month food supply looks like personal preparedness to you. It looks like hoarding to an enforcement team redistributing resources to a shelter feeding 400 people. During 1940s wartime rationing, households exceeding ration allocations faced confiscation and criminal penalties. That's not ancient history. That's the last time this legal framework was fully activated. It worked exactly as designed. Compliance was high because penalties were immediate. The legal infrastructure for identical action exists today. Updated. Expanded. Waiting for activation. Military civil affairs doctrine teaches something most civilians never consider. Centralized food control is a primary tool for maintaining social order during a crisis, not a secondary objective. A primary tool. Large private stockpiles aren't just viewed by authorities as resources to redistribute. They're viewed as threats to centralized crisis management. Your independence undermines their control model. That makes your food supply a strategic target, not just a logistical one. Now consider visibility. Basement shelving lined with labeled 5-gallon buckets is a visual signature recognizable to any enforcement team conducting a welfare check, a damage assessment, or a neighbor. Report follow-up. Freeze-dried food companies ship in branded boxes. Delivery drivers see them. Neighbors see them. Online purchase records link your name to bulk food acquisition. You've built a supply chain with your name attached at every single point. The civilian approach is building the largest possible stockpile in the most convenient location. One house, one basement, one pantry room. Everything centralized for easy rotation and access. While that approach maximizes efficiency, it also maximizes seizure exposure. One address, one entry. Total loss. Informed people distribute. Multiple locations. Multiple containers. Nothing in a volume that triggers the undefined hoarding threshold at any single site. Same total supply. Radically different risk profile. The quantified difference comes down to a single enforcement reality. Authorities operating during a crisis have limited personnel, limited time, and limited transport capacity. They prioritize high-yield targets. One household with a visible 12-month supply for a family of 4 represents a high-yield seizure. 12 months of calories in one stop. That's efficient for them. The same supply distributed across 3 locations, stored in non-branded containers, acquired through varied purchase channels, doesn't register as a high-yield target at any single point. Enforcement teams move to the next address. Your supply survives because it never looked like a supply. Here's what this all comes down to. 5 categories: medications, fuel, firearms, communications equipment, food, and water. Every one of them sits under active, enforceable requisition authority at federal or state level. Every one of them carries the same 3 variable vulnerability: traceability, visibility, and legal classification. You can't change the law. You can change your signature. The guide I've written up goes deeper on structuring your entire preparedness approach around legal exposure, and it's the first link below. So the question is simple. How many of your preps right now would survive a knock on your door?